take a seat. Get people settled.
I wonder if you could put that up.
Now I know what it's like to be an actor up here on stage because the lights are blinding me right now. Good evening. My name is Charles Kratz. I'm Dean of the Weinberg Memorial Library, and I want to welcome you to the Weinberg Library's 20th Anniversary Lecture Series, which has been going on. We've been celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Weinberg Libraries through the year 2012, and I guess we'll continue to celebrate it even into 2013, so there are a few more events coming up. But tonight's program is entitled Native Son, Stephen Karam in conversation with Paul Holdengraber. And I want to tell you a little bit about how we decided to have this program tonight. Some people in the room may recognize the name of Father Panuska, who 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, helped plan the Weinberg Memorial Library with me and our staff. And one of the things that he emphasized to me as we were building the Weinberg Library is that libraries are all about learning. And our library should particularly be about touching the world in Scranton and the world beyond Scranton. And I think if you think about the Schimmel Forum, and I think there are many Schimmelites in the room tonight, that has really met his goal in terms of what we're doing, not only through the library, but the Schimmel Forum. So Sandra Myers, who's the director of the Schimmel Forum, and I wanted to celebrate some of the rich treasures in our society. And we believe that, the libraries, the Weinberg Library, and the New York Public Library is one of the rich treasures in our lives. And so we thought that we might look for someone from the New York Public Library to come here to talk to us. And Paul's name, who is Director of Public Programming at the New York Public Library, and also the Director of the Live at the New York Public Library, which is a fascinating series on the art of public conversations. And again, we felt that we wanted to bring more in terms of public conversations to the University of Scranton. So we celebrate libraries, but we also wanted to celebrate tonight the literary and performing arts. Thomas Jefferson said, "I cannot live without books." And from a very young age, it's one of my biases, I cannot live without the playwright and theater. And so it's something that's really very personal to me and something very important to me. So we thought, who could we bring? And I had just recently seen Stephen Karam's production of Sons of the Prophet at the Roundabout Theater, and I thought, maybe we could get Stephen Karam. He's a native son of Scranton, to come for our program tonight. And Sandra, of course, always says, why not? We went ahead and did that. So we celebrate all of those things tonight, and then I also want to say one more small bias on my part. One of my treasures, because she's become a very good friend and a colleague, is Sandra Myers, who has really led the Schimmel Forum and brought an outstanding group of speakers to Scranton. And we could not have done what has been accomplished in a short period of time without her. So it's my great honor and privilege, because I work with her all the time, to introduce Sandra Myers, who will introduce our program tonight.
Good evening and warm welcome to all. How happy we are that we were able to reschedule this very special event so soon after we were trumped by Hurricane Sandy. We were surely among the more fortunate victims of that storm and can rejoice in that. We are particularly grateful that tonight's remarkable conversationalists were able to rearrange their schedules to be with us. This Schimmel Forum has a tagline, "The joy of learning together." It's because we have, in a sense, become an informal, enthusiastic, energized community of learners. But one of our recent speakers on foreign affairs claimed that we are bringing the world to Scranton, and I propose that that become our tagline starting tonight. It's an honor to present tonight's program in which we can say resoundingly that we are bringing the world to Scranton. We have our native son, highly regarded, award-winning young playwright Stephen Karam, here on very familiar turf in conversation with Paul Holdengraber, Director of Public Programs at the New York Public Library, who is, well, variously from Houston, Mexico City, Los Angeles, and Brooklyn, making his first visit to Scranton. So much for the geography. Stephen's work has brought praise from knowledgeable audiences and from the toughest of critics. I first encountered it in this very theater when I came to see Columbinus here. At that time, I had not heard of Stephen or the play, but I was moved beyond description by the work itself and by the exquisite production performed by students of this university. It equaled and exceeded many plays I've seen in New York on and off Broadway. I've had the good fortune to see Speech and Debate and Sons of the Prophet as well, and I understand all of those will be on sale in the lobby after the program. It's clear that Stephen is not a hit-and-miss playwright. Paul Holdengraber has willingly and graciously left his perch at the Celeste Bartos Forum at the New York Public Library to have this conversation with Stephen tonight in Scranton. Paul is, well, he's a kind of legend, a fearless virtuoso who delights in the fine art of conversation. In a recent article in the Wall Street Journal, journalist Ralph Gardner described him as possessing a remarkable complement of skills: charm, erudition, curiosity, and perhaps most of all, chutzpah, if you know that word. I could say more about the two stars, but it will be much more illuminating and infinitely more fun to hear from them themselves. So let's welcome the two masters of the spoken word who are gracious enough to allow us to eavesdrop on their conversation tonight. Aren't we lucky?
Stephen, what a great pleasure it is to have you here back in your hometown. And I'd like to first thank Sandra Meyer so much for this very kind invitation. But how is it to be back? What does it mean to be back?
It's incredible to be back. I mean, we just walked from the Radisson and
train station.
The train station. I hadn't been in that building
staying in
since.
A train station, it's lovely.
It is lovely.
You have a very nice train station.
I hadn't been in that building since my sister was married there, actually. But no, it's incredible to be back. I still am very moved and just by the support that the university in particular has shown me and my work. I was telling you, I think I was more nervous coming home to see Speech and Debate in this theater than I was on opening night in New York City.
How do you
just
explain
because
that?
Well, because so part of, when you come home, you feel like you're, I left Scranton at 18 for college, and so part of me always feels, I think, I sort of become a teenager again when I come home, and all of the anxiety I had, in high school, and so it's this, I'm getting older, and I'm now just more and more not only comfortable coming home, but excited to come home, and just so happy that I've somehow gotten to a point where I can share my work with not just in New York City where I live now, but that I've been able to bring it back home to where really the work I think should be done, because I'm writing about people, and also I think the things and the people and the emotions that are all being dragged up in my work, I think are all come from Scranton, The good, the bad, and the ugly, it's all Scranton.
In that order.
It's really special.
In that order.
Yeah, for sure in that order.
Yeah, in that order.
Yeah. What do you think of Scranton so far?
Well, so far I'm seeing it very much through your eyes.
Yeah.
I haven't had too much time here. I arrived about 45 minutes before meeting Stephen, and so my impressions are extremely fresh. I
want to get you to do I wanted you to do the coal mine tour. He was asking about you found out that the train was still operational,
yes.
But I was explaining how it once actually, went right to, I think, Hoboken, right? Into New York City, right? So, I mean, this town was once like directly linked. by
You know,
train to
what
to New York City.
strikes me is your recognition. You are twice the age now as when high school was particularly difficult for you.
I would say difficult, also joyous. I don't want to paint too dark a picture, but I think adolescence is tricky for everyone. But yes, I want to couch it in I don't want to be too morbid about my adolescence. I was a happy kid overall. I mean, I really was.
Well, I do want to recognize your parents.
I mean, my family's here. I don't want them thinking.
So I mean, there they are. Let's recognize them. There they are.
I will say, my family is here, and I think the greatest gift. Also, when you get older, and you come home, and you have such incredible family to come home to, you realize how rare and special that is. And one thing that I always had. Was unconditional love. That was never
a question.
It was never a question.
But to come back to try to reclaim what I was saying about double the age, it strikes me, since you were asking me, I think quite genuinely, what my feeling was of Scranton. What strikes me as particularly interesting is that you came out of it, and that such fine work came from here, and you owe it to this place. Because in this place, as you said to me, theater in some way absorbed you. You became utterly immersed, engulfed, nearly contaminated as by pleasure.
I don't think, were those my exact words?
No,
Contaminated by pleasure. But
as by pleasure.
As by pleasure. I mean, sure. I think theater becomes an escape.
Refuge.
It becomes a refuge for a lot of people who probably like me. And I was deeply in the closet when I was in high school. But deeply aware that I was gay, and so this wasn't a conscious sort of gravitation towards theater, but it's just kind of what happens in a lot of small towns. I think it's not uncommon for the gay kid to sort of find an escape via storytelling, via getting to, I was sort of trying to figure out how to play my own role successfully of who I was, and so I think it was kind of a no-brainer. I saw my sister in the first play I saw. This isn't some high-class first experience where I saw, Troilus and Cressida or something. This was Little Shop of Horrors at North Scranton Middle School. My sister was in 6th grade. And it was one of those great, things that can only happen in middle school, where the three doo-wop girls, Crystal, Ronette, and Chiffon, who are expressly African-American per the script, but were just played by like 1,000 white girls, because, just to give everyone a chance to, and my sister was one of the, nondescript. But I just sort of sat there, and there was the man-eating plant, and the love story, and I just didn't even know something like that was a thing, and so it was just, from then on in, I think I was hooked. And I would, again, no train to New York City, but a lot of the school field trips and bus trips were to New York City via Martz. I came here via Martz. Everyone knows Martz. The shopper specials, and I had, two parents who there was no artists per se in my family. My mother's very creative, played piano, but no marker for someone who was a singer or an actor or a creative writer, and with no sort of marker for that, they were extraordinary and just sort of, I don't think they knew what was happening, but they were both kind of just like, okay, you know what I mean, and supportive. And so my mom, birthdays, I think often the one thing I wanted would be, for Christmas would be bus tickets to New York with her, and we'd go, and I just wanted to see a Broadway show. So TKTS tickets, we'd wait in line, get the half-price tickets. Now, inexplicably, the bus is like $100 to get round trip. I have no idea like what happened, but growing up, it was, and I think if you go on a shopper special bus, you're looking at me like I'm realizing shopper special buses.
I know that it's an inside joke. I mean, I understand that everybody here understands what a shopper special is.
Everyone but you.
Everybody but me. This happens to me often, you know. But that's all right. In the last 5 or 6 years that I've been introducing various people at the library, actually a little bit more, maybe 8 years, I've come to no longer read biographies of the talent, the writers, the actors, the filmmakers, all the various people I interview. I ask them to give me a biography in 7 words. And on the Marz bus.
Yes, there's not a lot of thought went
on
into
the
this.
On the Marz bus, on the shopper's special.
This was not the shopper's special.
It was not on the non.
This cost $100. This is the $100
non-shoppers on the expensive Marz.
Very expensive.
Non-special.
And the free Wi-Fi didn't work either.
I had asked you a couple of times, and then you probably felt the urgency of the necessity of these 7 words. And so you sent me 7, and it's very interesting. Incidentally, I've had about 300-400 7 words from various people. Everybody from, Tom Wolfe last week, Stephen Karam tonight, next week Zadie Smith or Jay-Z or Keith Richards. It's very, very varied. And these are your 7 words, which I'd like us to unpack.
Okay.
And don't tell me, I wrote them quickly, I don't know what they mean.
Okay.
Because they do mean something for you, I know.
Okay.
And I think they are significant in the context.
I know. So I was telling you, this is what therapy feels like. I think I don't know.
As I said,
miraculously, I have not been in therapy yet, but now I feel like this is my first session. I saw the chairs.
From time to time, it is important to go into the basement and look at the old furniture. So
let's do it.
Here's what your 7 words. My knees hurt.
Okay.
Keep walking to Moscow.
Those were
Yeah.
Do you want to unpack that? I think I have to unpack that to figure out what that means.
I
do know what they mean.
Do the work.
Well, 7 words, my brain just went to a place of feeling a little too young to figure out how do I encapsulate my life. I still feel like I'm figuring so much of it out. I guess a defining thing for me that's very evident in Sons of the Prophet, I think probably, was I had some, again, not to get morbid, I'm doing just fine, but I had some medical travails at a somewhat young age. When I was 18, I sort of was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And after that had some ongoing bouts with joint pain. Long story short, I think everyone becomes aware of their own mortality at some point in your life. But I think when you're in your late teens, your 20s, you're sort of grappling with things of that nature. I think it just shifted the way I think about my own life, the way I see other people around me. I think a part of me got very old very fast.
You said that to me. Because there's that line of Thucydides that some people are born with gray hair.
Yeah, and do you see my gray hair? I had my first gray hairs when I was 18.
I didn't quite mean it that way.
I know.
No, I meant that, an old soul.
An old soul.
An old soul that speaks about issues that are, I have to tell you, I have to admit this, I very, very rarely interview playwrights. I very, very rarely read plays. I told Stephen, it's difficult for me to read a play. I don't know how to read a play. It's not easy. It's not easy to do.
They're meant to be seen.
They're meant to be seen. I have to tell you, I am sure this play is meant to be seen, but it doesn't lose a lot in translation being read. It is extraordinary to read. It is extraordinary to read because, in my view, the characters are really painted with such essential poignancy, and it comes from a place of being an old soul. Something must have happened in your brush with.
Well, it just makes you. I mean, I think those discoveries can come. I mean, they come for everyone. But I think if you have brushes with, I have some friends in their 30s that haven't been to a funeral. I think if you lose people that you love in your life early, and I lost some people suddenly, and was sort of at funerals at a young age, and sort of now I'm going back. This is turning into a therapy session. So I mean, I think that's part of it. I think.
I'll give you an extra long
the first time, I think, being just my first year in college and struggling with my health, when you're 18, you're trying to be as attractive as possible to, find love, to go to a fraternity party. You're not, I think when life throws things at you like that, that's just what happens. And so I think, I didn't stop being a young person, certainly, but you just have to sort of, before maybe you are wanting to deal with things of that nature, you're dealing with them.
So I didn't quite realize, until you said it right now, how, or is, maybe I should say not how, is the character of Joseph autobiographical?
He's not. I mean, the truth is, my plays, I think, are all deeply autobiographical, but they're not autobiography. Like, if you read my plays, this is not a try to find Stephen in this play. Sons of the Prophet, it's more fun to play that game because, I mean, I did run cross country. I certainly wasn't good. I was perfectly fine, but I'm writing about like a champion. I think if you create fictional events and create a nice shield of fiction, no matter how many maybe shadings or details, I'm half Lebanese, this family is Lebanese American, things like that are rooted in truth, but the only way for me to, I think, be truly honest about, I mean, not just things that I want to talk about, but also what I'm observing in other people, is behind a shield of fiction. So it's not a cop-out. I'm actually saying that they're more personal than if I were to actually sit down and try and tell you write a play about what actually happened to me in
Let's stay a minute longer on My Knees Hurt.
Oh gosh, can we please get away from
no,
these?
but for
the worst part of my biography.
No, but for the audience, it's important in terms of Joseph.
Okay, yeah,
because his knees hurt.
His knees definitely hurt.
And his knees hurt, and he...
And like a good dramatist, you make the stakes higher by, when a writer's knees hurt, not so interesting. When somebody whose entire identity has been built around
pain.
Being a runner.
Being a runner, yeah.
It's everything. It means suddenly if you've defined yourself by this, like, God-given skill, this thing that you are better at than most people, that's just a great dramatic sort of starting point. And then, of course, I have everything else fall apart in his life as well. So, book of Jobishness to the whole thing.
Keep walking.
Keep walking we're getting out of the sad part. The keep walking is just, I had 7 words, so I was thinking, what's a nice bridge to something better? That one discovers how to cope with these things. I certainly did. And the to Moscow part, can I get to the to Moscow part? Is that too soon?
No.
Because everyone here thinks it's probably Moscow, Pennsylvania, which is where I was actually born, strangely.
Well, let me tell you, I was most amazed on my ride over that I saw Moscow. I was thinking, my goodness.
It's true.
Because of course
that's where my parents first built a house. So it was, I think I was 1 when I'm checking it with my parents. Yeah, I was 1. My sister was about 4, I think, when we moved to Scranton from Moscow. So I'm trying to get back to to Moscow is sort of a famous snippet from Three Sisters, which is one of Chekhov's most famous plays. And the sisters never get to Moscow, but I feel like I hope in my life, that spirit of to Moscow, that sort of dreaming of the faraway place. I feel like in some respects I've gotten there already. I sort of always had my eye on New York City, and I took myself there. I didn't walk. I took the Martz bus, but
it's.
But keep walking and to Moscow with an exclamation point, just meaning how important I think it is just to not just to stay positive, but to keep seeking adventure and to stay curious about people and the world and other places, and just a reminder that, I hope my life is always one of sort of looking over the horizon and unlike the Three Sisters, I hope I keep traveling, even, it's so that's kind of where
I can't hesitate and resist asking you about how important Chekhov is for you. I found a line from Chekhov, not one we discussed before, that strikes me as very powerful. It's in a letter he wrote on October 18th, 1888, where he says there should be more sincerity and heart in human relations, more silence and simplicity in our interactions. Be rude when you're angry, laugh when something is funny, and answer when you're asked.
That's great.
Isn't it?
It's fantastic. He's the master. I mean, the only dangerous thing about talking about this is, one, who doesn't draw inspiration for what playwrights, don't.
Yes, but you've said this to me, and yes. But not everybody makes themselves vulnerable in the same way.
Yeah, I suppose it's just, I'm not an overtly, I think all plays are political, and I feel like you could unpack certainly Speech and Debate and Sons of the Prophet for the politics of those plays. But I'm not, Sir David Hare or one of these brilliant writers who are able to actually, come out with a Via Dolorosa. I'm not going to unpack the Israeli-Palestine conflict. It's just not the way my mind works. And I think I discovered Chekhov, what he does that is just sort of, I think, almost gave me permission to be myself. He tells stories that are quite beautifully structured, but seem to go It's almost like in some ways he's like the Seinfeld of, his plays seem to be about nothing. But in fact, in the 5 major plays he's left, that it's sort of, you spend an evening with these cast of characters where not so much happens, but you feel like somehow every facet of humanity has been touched upon. There's an epicness to something that seems so ordinary and so small. And who doesn't, I mean, isn't that kind of majestic and
it's
special?
Majestic.
And just to even see that it can be done. And I think it gave me permission to just tap into the part of me that feels like I have something to say via just the way that I feel like, I should be saying it,
Well,
because before he did that, I think people would have thought, what on earth are you thinking? It's kind of a ludicrous idea to sort of achieve the grandeur that he was able to achieve in such seemingly staid, ordinary parameters. Do you know what I mean?
Chekhov really matters to you so much that the first page is under the sign of 2 Chekhov quotations. The first one is, "Happiness does not await us all. One needn't be a prophet to say that there will be more grief and pain than serenity and money. That is why we must hang on to one another." And it's the last part of that quotation that I particularly find compelling in the context of your work. We must hang on one to another. The play seems so much about connectedness.
Yeah, and I mean, on some level, the family is, I think the favorite thing anyone's ever said about the play, the favorite comment I've ever received was that, because there's so much dysfunction in the play about things falling apart and things going wrong, was that it's about, it's a play about a functional family of sorts, which is, everything is sort of falling apart in this play in terms of the father has just passed away suddenly, financial situation is not going so well for the family. The main character's health is falling apart. The uncle is moving in with them. One of the family members, his health is failing, putting up the hospital bed in the. But what's never questioned, and this wasn't just conscious, this was just the family I created, sort of without really thinking much about it, that their love for each other is not called into question, meaning it's
Between the brothers?
between the brothers, and even the love of the uncle for the brothers, and there's not a lot of I love yous flying around the
I don't think
stage.
there's any.
I don't think there's any, but
No,
I feel
don't
like
think there's one. I mean,
I don't know. Do you feel the love, Paul? I feel.
do I feel the love?
Feel the love between the family. I mean, maybe
yeah.
you disagree. I mean, I
yeah.
do think that I don't. Maybe I took it for granted, but meaning on some level, yeah. I mean that we must hang on to each other. I mean, it's a hard sort of lesson to learn. It's a scary lesson to learn that on some level, you can get so caught up with, our lives are so busy with our jobs, and there's like a insane. How many of us have not had a crazy boss that has overworked us? Or
I must say,
how do you keep track of the important things?
What to my mind is so extraordinary is that at the beginning of the play, there is absolutely no runway. There is no preamble. It begins in medias res, like nothing I have read.
With the car crash?
With just the interruption.
Yeah.
I mean, you have an incredible art of interrupting your characters. It is Gloria and Joseph.
Right.
And that, maybe you want to set the stage a little bit and explain what happens in that very first scene between Gloria and Joseph.
Oh my goodness, so much. There's more exposition in that scene than I think I ever thought I could fit into one scene.
An email is not received.
An email is not received. A 29-year-old guy who you learn throughout the course of the scene is taking some time off from his running is clearly, as we learn the dynamic between the boss and the employee, clearly taken this job for health insurance. He needs health insurance, and this is at a time where he has a pre-existing condition, and so this is his ticket to MRIs and physical therapy and et cetera, et cetera. And he works for somebody who has, by her own describing my own work, I realize how crazy it sounds. That's why I'm laughing. She has fallen from grace. She was a former Manhattanite book publisher in the book packaging business, and has moved back to the area where her husband had grown up to sort of rebuild her own life and try and get her own grief and pain and career, see if she can pick up the pieces. And somewhat frighteningly, you realize that she has honed in on Joseph's, she's discovered that far back in his history is the author Khalil Gibran, distantly related. And Gibran is one of the best-selling authors of all time. To a book packager, this is not only big news, but yeah, especially for someone who has fallen from grace and is struggling to come up with any semblance of a thing that can get her back in the game. And this seems to be, she seems to think this is her ticket. And meanwhile, it's just the start of Joseph's. You learn in the middle of the scene, Joseph's someone who likes to keep his own personal life private, that he has been trying to get out of the office because his father has been in a very serious car accident. And things only go downhill from there. But it's a comedy. It's actually very funny.
No, and
it really is.
And it's written about your work
funny.
It's a comedy about human suffering.
Because it is fun. You know what I mean? It is. I mean, nothing is sadder than I think the things I'm talking about, but also nothing is funnier. I just think you can't separate the two. I mean, we don't need to talk about specific relationships I've had with employers and people, but I mean, it's just that I just think sometimes the dynamic between these things and just what you have to do, someone in your life passes away and like you're waking up and putting your pants on and like pouring Cheerios into a bowl, you know what I mean? There's, even when it's not funny, there's just a kind of, just the things that we do to sort of move forward and stumble on in the face of like, I think the hardest moments, I find interesting. I mean, ultimately, I think the play is, in hindsight, I don't write from theme, but when looking back, I mean, it's sort of...
You don't write from theme.
I don't write from theme, because I'm too preoccupied with telling a good story, and if I think if you start from theme, or if I were to start from theme, I think it would become a little less exciting, a little less... I like to finish and then start to get a handle on what have I done, and then you start to realize. And in this case, I think I'm just looking at, how do we cope with the pain that doesn't go away, whether it's nagging arthritis as you age, whether it's the breaking down of your body physically, whether it's the loss of somebody, your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, that, no matter how much, the medicines now for it's just Andrew Solomon, Paul, I sat in on one of his interviews last week, this extraordinary writer who wrote an unbelievable book about depression, and sort of seeing the science about, there's a cure for everything nowadays, pills for and plans and treatment. And I think there's still a comedy, especially because we live in a time where it's almost unacceptable for us to not have a neat solution for everything. We don't give ourselves the space and the time, and you're at work and you lose a loved one, and it's all about policy and like how many personal days do you have, and so I think I'm just interested in how do you manage the pain that doesn't go away. I think hanging on to each other is number one, and I think faith, which plays a large role in this. I mean, I have a very complicated relationship with my own, faith or lack thereof, but it's funny. Like looking back, I feel like I've gotten more positive feedback from priests and rabbis on the play itself, because I think I have such an overwhelming. I'm almost in awe of what faith can do in terms of providing stability and comfort. And yet, I think it's why so many people believe. Strangely, it makes more sense to me as I sort of wrestle with it on a personal level, if that makes sense. It reminds
me of a Baudelaire line who said that even if God didn't exist, it wouldn't be a reason not to believe in him.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the pain that doesn't go away, to my mind, this brings back to mind those first lines I read of Chekhov. There should be more sincerity and heart in human relations. Yeah. Because one of the most astounding parts of the play, that beginning, which begins, the play begins under the sign of a stretch. There's a stretch at the beginning, right. Joseph stretches. Yeah. And then Joseph stretches at the end.
At the end, or with someone.
And with someone. I'm curious about
and in
those,
time to music.
Yes. I'm curious about those two stretches, but I'm also curious about the connectedness between him and Gloria, Joseph and Gloria, because one of the astounding elements in my view of that first scene is how little they hear each other. And that's why I was talking about what I think you have mastered, which is the art of interruption. So you have these characters.
I want to interrupt you now.
Well, please. I always say that digression is the sunshine of narrative. I will remember what you say.
No. Keep going. I was joking.
I can't say. What was I saying? No. Anyway.
You were talking about the art of interruption.
No, but you interrupt your characters, and in the process of doing that, I don't know if anybody's told you this, but it strikes me as very strong, these interruptions. In the process, a lot of information is communicated.
Oh, sure.
An enormous amount of information is communicated, though in some way they are terribly misunderstanding each other.
Sure. And I mean, a lot is communicated in the silences and what characters don't say to each other. I mean, that's probably why it's a strange experience to go, especially because you read so many great novels,
Yeah.
where suddenly you're not being handed any subtext, and so you're inferring everything based on, we rarely say what we mean. We don't often let each other finish each other's sentences, especially in a family dynamic. I think the brothers are constantly talking over each other and interrupting each other. I mean, what brothers have a polite, even when you're in a good mood, you're always kind of a step ahead of your brother, I think.
We started by talking about Scranton, and your return as prodigal son coming back here now. I'm also curious, and the strangeness of that. I'm curious how much Lebanon plays in your background.
I mean, a lot in that. I'm sort of the generation that I grew up going to a Maronite church. That was the first, I'd say, maybe up until 3rd or 4th grade that we were at St. Anne's Maronite, which just means my normal, the Maronite faith, for anyone who's not familiar, is essentially it's the Lebanese version of Roman Catholicism. That's very reductive, but it is Catholicism, the Catholic Mass with, and they are tied to the Vatican, with more incense, and a little more Arabic chanting, perhaps, by the priest. Not perhaps, there is definitely more Arabic chanting. So that's, on just a pure level, and my family's half Lebanese. My grandfather was born in Lebanon and came over when he was, as I understand it, in his mid-20s. My oldest uncle, possibly my aunt as well, but my oldest uncle for sure was born in Lebanon as well. My father's one of 10, and my father's number 9. So I think as much as Lebanon specifically has had an influence, and I did go back I visited for the first time. So it's kind of an interesting thing where your grandfather...
When did you go?
I went in May, June of 2011.
What surprised you?
Everything. What didn't surprise me? The country had just loomed so large for me in terms of, everyone wants to, I think, know where did your grandparents come from, and because Lebanon also just holds this place in the news, and I had read From Beirut to Jerusalem, Friedman's, famous book, and it looms so large in many ways, and you go, and it is the size of, I don't know, like Connecticut in terms of, and you realize how a place can have that power just, it's in the crossroads of all of these, just it's geography. The play talks about geography, but it literally, and by virtue of where it is located.
And Lebanon is described in a particular way.
It is described, the younger brother in the play is a geography nerd and has taken to associating countries with shapes and animals, and I was looking at the map, and I realized that if you just added an eyeball and a tongue, Lebanon looks like a man screaming in pain, so with the mouth sort of open into the
You see, what I love about you at this particular moment is that you're saying all this and with a huge smile.
Well, because I remember, I'm trying to think now.
Screaming in pain.
And hair, because it's very funny. Well, the man I drew is very, the image you end up coming up with, especially if you draw a tongue, is very funny. So it's not that serious. And yeah, I remembered coming up with, I had just, I wanted just an easy way to remember sort of the geography. And I remember thinking seeing the mouth and thinking of Lebanon has its hair, sort of facing away from the water in Syria, so the hair doesn't get wet. Israel is like a turtleneck sweater, and that's ended up finding its way into the play, just my own memory devices. But everything surprised me. First of all, it's unbelievably beautiful. Having a last name that in Lebanon, Karam is like Smith. And so to go from sort of, as is Duahi, the name that I borrow for the play. So to go from the name that sort of everyone's sort of like Karam, Kran, to like everyone's like, oh, Karam, you know, it's just I'm getting free everything at the restaurants, and you know they see it on your credit card, and people couldn't be more friendly, very welcoming culture, and the mountains are incredible. Like traveling up north, so my grandfather wasn't from Beirut, he was from a small town up north, and the mountain towns, I mean, I fictionalize in this, I use Shari, which is where Gibran is from, which is very close to Shkorta, which I can't say properly, but in the north, and it's literally so precarious. They're just the most unbelievable, unbelievable mountains, and yeah, I mean, just you feel like you're on the other side of the world. I mean, just the journey when you can go back not quite so far in your family's history. It was, you know, and I think to anybody who's done a similar kind of journey back, it's to be then suddenly like standing in a place and it feels so unfamiliar and so far away. And you think of that epic journey that my grandfather took with, you know, with no money and, you know, his tailoring trade, like setting up shop here to provide for 10 kids, is like part of a reason why he can have a gay grandson who's writing plays and somehow now coming back to the area that he had, you know, it's all like, sometimes it's just like a little, you know, it's so much, but that all kind of crystallizes in a nice silent way when you're just, you know, when I was actually there traveling, and I was there by myself, which was great because I'm a pretty good solo traveler, and it was nice to just have that experience without it having to be very verbal or like, I didn't have to unpack it. It was just happening. Which is nice.
One of the characters in the play, I can't remember who, speaks about fake agreeing. What does that mean?
What is fake agreeing?
I'm sure this.
It happens in the play. It's. I mean, I guess you could call it slight passive aggression. I think in the context of the play, a character says something to the effect of,
I think I can find it.
Oh, okay. Okay, sure. You know, in response to something. And the other character is.
It's Joseph Joseph Timothy.
Let me see if I can. I'm going to have to try and read this and to make sense.
Do.
Okay. So I'll do this speech and debate style. I'll look this way when I'm Timothy, and this way when I'm Joseph. And of course, because I also like to have characters talk on top of each other, I'm not even going to be able to do it, but let me try it. So they're having a fight about, there's some class issues being brought up, and Timothy says, she's blue collar, and they fight, overlap. I'm sorry, I'm playing devil's advocate because I just think they're fair points to consider, Timothy. Oh, okay, sure. Yes, correct. Exactly then, sure. Joseph, are you fake agreeing with me? So just meaning he's picking up on the fact that one person is just not being genuine. He's fake agreeing.
So
I love that you picked that out of all things. It's hilarious.
Why?
Because it's just such a, it's just fun to me because it's very fake agreeing. I don't know why. It's just it's something I think.
Try.
It's something I hadn't thought about.
Reverse the roles a bit. Tell me.
It's a very well. It's that moment when a writer realizes how something that makes perfect sense. You know, to me, this word. It's just how I think. It's so I sort of created this. Are you fake agreeing with me?
Is it an expression used?
I don't know. Maybe not. But it's just
because I liked it a lot, but I didn't know what it meant. And I liked it a lot, and I recognized it also, you know, from having my own family and realizing, you know, how we.
No one wants to end an argument like with being told that you're right insincerely, if that makes sense.
And this leads me to another question, and we have another 12 minutes before we open it up to your questions. And unlike my questions, I've discovered that good questions can be asked in about 52 seconds. But the role of irony. I mean,
What about it?
I see. I wonder if irony holds power for you in these plays, because I don't.
It's a good question.
I don't see you as an ironic.
I feel like sincerity always wins the day with me. I think there are times when
Takes
there's
us back to
dramatic
check-
irony, where
Yeah.
a character like Timothy, I think, is being the reporter. There's a reporter in the play who I think is the closest thing to sort of a consistent irony is a character who's struggling to constantly be very sincere, and I think failing a lot at it. But I think people are. I'm more interested in sincerity. I think.
The
Yeah.
Chekhov line again.
The Chekhov
Yeah,
line
line
again.
again, yeah.
I think it's more human. I think it's more interesting, and I think I'm just better at it, you know. But I think my characters have a sense of humor, so it's. I think sometimes
humor
if
is something else.
I think people are funny. I think that's something that I
I
sort
can
of
tell you
appreciate.
think
I
that.
think people are
Yeah.
actually funny.
I
I
think
don't
so
just mean
too.
that they're funny to observe. I think
actually,
people
But I actually think that people.
people
if-
have good senses of humor.
But I
mean,
think
it's
that
really,
if you are with someone
and
who
you s-
does, I mean, you know, because
Yeah.
in human relationships, I think the worst thing that can happen
is when
if
someone
you,
doesn't have a sense of
No,
humor.
and if you're with someone who doesn't share your humor,
It's hard.
It's much worse than if they didn't read the TLS. I mean, it's
Well, exactly, but
the worst thing one could.
But it's also the scary thing about making a story that's sort of built around, and you know, when I came back here to see Speech and Debate, because it just seems like it's such a specific brand of, you know, I think you have to write to make yourself laugh. It's the only chance you're going to stand to make anyone else laugh. But that's strange, isn't it? That you have to do that, so that there's the fear that by doing the most sort of personal kind of humor, you're exposing yourself to an audience that might just say, "Bah, that's not funny." But you have to do it. You have to put yourself out there. It's the biggest chance of landing with a wide audience. You're never going to win everyone over, but. I mean, it's really vulnerable. I think making a play is it's like sending one of your, you know, it's like when someone doesn't like your play, it feels like somebody's making fun of, I mean, I'm not a father, but it's what I imagine sort of if someone makes fun of your child. I mean, you just, it's just too close to home. So you have to just prepare for what's going to come your way when you do something this public, like a play that's going to happen 8 times a week for hundreds of people every night. But it's a crazy ride to take because ultimately I do think, you know, until that first preview, you do sort of wonder, will anyone else find this funny, or will everyone be wondering about fake agreeing? You know what I mean? You wonder if what is this gonna be to people? What is it gonna?
Which leads me quite naturally to ask you about how strongly you think about audiences.
A lot, only, you know, not to the point of, again, like I try to write something that I would want to see myself.
And something
So in that
you
sense,
want to write.
it has to be something you want to write. It's why I'm not very prolific. I sort of wait for a very long time, and I don't write a play, I don't make something unless I really feel like I almost have to do it. Because then it's fun and it's an exhilarating ride to be on, and it's a little bit torturous, but it's you're always sort of in that place of it almost started itself.
The torture is kind of pleasurable.
It's kind of pleasurable, and there's nothing more incredible than doing what you love to do, and I love doing this, and so yeah. What was the first part of the question?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
Paul, what was the first part? It was
no, but,
good.
But something else that strikes me is what's happening to you now. Is you've become a professor. You teach.
Well, yes, very new, very early. Yes, I'm teaching for the first time. Yeah.
At the
new school.
At the new school.
Yeah.
And what's the discovery like there? Because you.
It's been incredible. I've learned that you can learn as much from your students as you maybe hoped to sort of bring to the table. I've learned.
And you're reading a lot.
Reading a lot. I mean, it's an incredible gift to be able to share your love of something and your own sort of passion for something with other people. I mean, so it's there's a responsibility.
Yeah.
I feel so. I was very nervous actually to start, and I'm normally like pretty okay in front of like I don't. It's not where I'm comfortable, but I can get through like something like this. Like I'm a little nervous, but I can get through it.
You're doing well. You're doing well.
But I mean, it's not my. I sort of dread it until it's,
Well,
and so it was
also
interesting to
because
see
you-
teaching, like, how would that be for me? Like, especially since I hadn't been in that mode, I hadn't been thinking about that. And it turns out that it just feels like the greatest gift to be able to pick apart stories and plays and great works of literature that have meant so much to me and to the world, and to figure out why they work and what's going on here, and being able to have those discussions, and also with these are second-year MFA students, which has also been really fantastic, because I feel like in some ways I feel like I'm talking with people who will very likely be where I am in just a few years.
Do you find them like you were? In other words, do you find that they are old souls as well? Do you find that they inhabit a non-ironic world, a world of sincerity?
No, I mean, yes and no. Yes and no. Everyone's so. I have a group of 4 students. I mean, it's very small. There's a new school. They accept exactly.
You have 4 students.
So 4 students.
Gosh.
I'd
like to come once.
So you can come. You can come as many times as you want. You can come and observe.
I'll increase 20% the attendance.
Exactly.
But tell me.
Wait, what was the question, Paul?
The question, I'll tell you there. There I remember.
Students?
Yes, because I think what struck me is that you speak to your generation but don't belong to it in some way.
Well,
what I mean is there's a.
I hope I belong to
well,
it.
Yes, but don't worry too much about what I'm saying. You, Stephen, you belong to it, but.
No, I hear you.
But the way you have ingurgitated, have swallowed, have been joyously contaminated by Chekhov, is different. When you say everybody has been taken by Chekhov, I would agree with you. But somehow,
I think what you're saying is like, yes,
cynical. There doesn't seem to be any sarcasm or any cynicism in this play.
I just feel like real people, I think the people I end up writing about are very aspirational, and I think they're also, regardless whether they're middle class, lower middle class, upper class, they're also I don't know. Aspirational.
Well, but the question was about your students. If you because remember when you came to the Andrew Solomon, he just recently wrote a book called Far from the Tree about children who are so different from their parents, with disabilities of all kinds, whether they're children who have Down syndrome or autism or prodigies. Here's an incredible chapter about prodigies with one of the prodigies you've worked with, Nico Muley,
who did the music for this
who did the music for this play, and who wanted me to talk to you a lot about Lebanon. But at any rate, children can be so different from their parents, and you now have your own children, as it were, in these students, and you feel very responsible for them.
I also feel like my biggest job, and of course I'm still figuring all this out, but I feel like my biggest job is to not have them, the last thing I want them to do is to write like me. I want them to write the plays that only they could write. Quite literally, the best plays that they can write are going to be the ones that could only come from them. And if they're...
How do you do that?
But part of writing plays in your early 20s is you're still you read David Mamet and you start to write like David Mamet or Carol Churchill or Tony Kushner. I think for everyone it's a different journey to get to that place where you write your first play that feels like you. And so it's almost giving them permission to fail, and to fail big, and to feel safe taking risks. And sometimes you see an incredible shift just in a writer who you might have written off because they've just attempted to write about, I don't know, Czechoslovakia and the recent, and then suddenly they come in the next week and they're writing a play about like a father and a son, and it's like they're a different writer. They're sort of even figuring out not just what kind of writers they are, but they're at an age where they're also sort of asking questions. What do I write about? Those are not for young writers. Those are not small questions. Those are big, scary questions.
I was wondering.
So you can't really hit your stride, I think, until you find that, and the strange thing, I had never went to grad school, and so the strange thing you realize and the amazing thing about students who are studying creative writing on the graduate level is that they are just, we can sort of like walk for days and read, and I can read Andrew Solomon's book and get lost in it and think of what that has inspired. But their responsibility is to come in and bring pages, week after week, and even when inspiration isn't there. And so part of your job is just encouraging.
How tough are you?
I think it's just exciting, and again, it's been instructive in how you can get to such interesting places by. I've always been sort of not of the school of like set your alarm and you must write 10 pages a day. There are writers who have the routines where even if there's no inspiration, I have such spurts that I sort of like to wait until I know what I'm writing about and then sort of see what comes. But I've learned just to see what can come from sheer, they're just going to fail if they don't come in with pages. Well, to see how even the frustration of what am I doing, asking those questions, what am I doing, when you're not the person who's so vulnerable bringing in those pages, I can actually see a lot of really amazing things that they are doing, and the discussions that can come from that. Also in the context of, we read plays every week. So it's always framed around great literature,
What's interesting to me is when I asked you for your forebearers, and I asked you for those people who had influenced you, and your response was, everybody has.
Everybody.
I mean, every step I've taken along the road in Scranton when I was 15 and happy and miserable, and read these plays. They were my lifesaver, and Tony Kushner mattered to me so much, and Thornton Wilder mattered to me so much. And then you were kind of intrigued by a reference that maybe you hadn't realized had such a deep influence on you, and I'd like to read it. Stephen and I haven't prepared this very much, but he did give me this notation, which I think is extremely interesting, and we'll end on this note, extremely interesting in terms of how and where inspiration happens, and the serendipity of it, the fact that you don't quite know where something comes from, and therefore be attentive to everything, and it might show up later on. And this is from a partial reading you did of Moby Dick,
yeah.
In school.
It's a great passage.
It's a great passage. I'll read that passage, and then I'll ask you to read your passage and maybe make the link between the two. You speak about how strangely moved you were by this passage, and how it spills over in strange ways in your own work.
Just that great moment where you see someone writing about something that feels so different than from yourself, and such an epic enterprise, and you just have that moment of shared experience of humanity, of someone describing something that registers deeply.
And you may not even know it at that moment.
And didn't even know I'd stored it away. Yeah.
And here's what you quote of Moby Dick. We felt very nice and snug, the more so since it was so chilly out of doors. Indeed, out of bedclothes too, seeing that there was no fire in the room. The more so, I say, because truly to enjoy bodily warmth, some small part of you must be cold. For there is no quality in this world that is not what it is merely by contrast. Made me think also about Chekhov. Nothing exists in itself. If you flatter yourself that you are all over comfortable and have been so a long time, then you cannot be said to be comfortable anymore. But if, like Queequeg and me in bed, the tip of your nose or the crown of your head be slightly chilled, why then, indeed, in the general consciousness you feel most delightfully and unmistakably warm. For this reason, a sleeping apartment should never be furnished with a fire, which is one of the luxurious discomforts of the rich. For the height of this sort of deliciousness is to have nothing but the blanket between you and your snugness and the cold of the outer air. Then there you lie like the one warm spark in the heart of an Arctic crystal. And then,
It's amazing.
isn't it?
It's amazing.
It's just fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you for
And
that.
I never, every time, well, it's thank me for that. I wish
mean-
I wrote that. That's
No,
not
but
me.
I mean, well, thank you for bringing this to our attention.
My pleasure, my pleasure. But I mean, I even
Why
think
is
about
it
that.
great?
Well, now
Yeah.
it's the heat in my Chinatown apartment isn't spectacular, and I still think about. It's funny, last night, because we had brought that up. I had mentioned that to you, and I just thought how the deliciousness, the word he uses, but
Yeah.
there's nothing better about getting under that duvet with, you know, a room that was maybe, I don't know, just clearly not 72 degrees. But okay, here is obviously not a literal
No.
interpretation of it, but something that made its way into the play that in hindsight, and so this is the character Gloria, who is come in from the cold, it's winter, and she's sitting on the couch, and she says, I'll tell you, when you're depressed, the cold is actually a blessing, the bitter cold is. Because sometimes the feeling of that pit here, the only consolation I have is being outside and then coming into the warmth. Because suddenly you go from being depressed and cold to something else. You're not better, but you are. Your body is pleased in spite of itself. You're aware of your vitality in a way you weren't before. It's so nice coming in out of the cold. So she's been struggling to describe this feeling, and then the character of Bill says, would you like to go outside and come back in? Sort of confused by that. So just an example of, obviously, what I love about the theater is that you can distill, you know, that is delicious, what you can do with prose, but there's sort of an inner struggle. Of course, if you have a glorious actress like Joanna Gleason, her eyes are just taking you, also telling another story, like telling such a deep story in sync with those words, you know.
What you can do with theater that you can't do
What you
through
can't do-
another medium.
Yeah, I mean, in a reading, of course, you lose some of it because, you know, again, you need to be seeing it performed
You
and
do lose
understanding the
something, but
context.
you also made me think of reading you, because I don't read many plays, you made me think of a line by Sartre where he said, when asked why he wrote theater, he said, I write theater to give voice to my enemies. And it's...
Yeah, I like that.
You do?
Yeah, I
Why?
do. Because I think I've put a lot of people I haven't been quite so fond of have made their ways into my book.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. So, Stephen,